usually, that's usually recorded. Sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're on.
Thank you. Sorry. Simone, do you guys have anything to say or to bring up in regard to the grant at this point?
Sure, thank you, Nancy. So a little bit different from the individual towns. We don't have specific items that we're going to be putting forward for the grant, rather just sort of broad support with what the towns are going to be putting forward all together. So I did have the chance to talk with Paula and Bob about the potential improvements for the trail connections tied to 2A, and then also spoke with Richard as well. So from the parks perspective, we're not going to put forward anything specific. And I know obviously some enhancements along the corridor with the small scale features is something else that we're supportive of, especially since that would help to essentially leverage what we're doing at the park through the Great American Outdoors Act for the walls, the fencing, and the landscape. So
it seems that part of what the park is doing fits into the Battle Road, and obviously one of the things that we need to do is to figure out matches and so forth. So you know, if the park is going to be spending money in the byway corridor, I guess we probably need to know that a little bit more so that we can properly account for it in our application.
Richard, I've asked a clarifying question about that from Chris.
Oh, good.
In terms of what they, so if we could just continue.
Good. We'll hold off on that. Great.
That's I'll just write that down so it doesn't get lost.
Yep.
Okay, and then for what I was doing for resource protection, what I've tried to do is identify things that might be done along the byway. And I was looking to find something that would fit for all the towns. But what I came up with was more this split rail fencing, clearing stone walls, repairing stone walls, and some minimal landscape rehabilitation. In some places, the adjacent properties or the affected properties, potentially affected properties, are owned by the towns or the national park or within the state right of way. So there would be permitting and approval processes associated with each one. But I think what I've been able to do, and I was with a landscape architect yesterday, looking at what might be possible and to get a sense of overall costs. I identified many locations that might be appropriate to include, and that the problem is getting if any approvals are required ahead of time, and what the process would be. But I think honestly that permitting and approval process could be a line item in our grant. So I'll be finishing. I have it 2/3 of the way finished, just a coherent, semi-coherent list of what might be acceptable to everybody along the byway and of concern. Because split rail and stone walls are so different in Arlington and Lexington, I'm not aware of areas where that would be appropriate in Arlington and Lexington, but people could think about that at some other time. So that's what I've been doing, and I hope to complete this work, this summary work today, and I will share that with Ollie, who can put that on the Google Docs. Thank you. I already got the link. I think that was fast. So that'll be good, and people can see what I'm thinking. I think this could meet many of the byway goals and impact some of the intrinsic qualities, help visitor experience, elevate the byway, And also at some of these intersections along the byway route where overgrowth has become rampant, might actually be an important safety consideration. I'm thinking one place might be at Mill Street. But anyway, I'll put that out today. So we could, if anybody else has anything else to add from the towns in terms of their project update, speak now.
So it seems that in terms of Lexington, obviously we have a bunch of stone walls and fences in Lexington, especially adjacent to and within the park. So don't
Yeah,
forget
I was
the
thinking
skill and
within the
so
park,
forth.
but on the other side of 128, it'd be good to know. I made an assumption that there might not be anything, but there might be. So, okay. And then, Chris, if you're here, we could address Richard's question. And I saw the letter and the exchange, and I think other people here did as well. But I'm not sure who all knows what came out. So you might want to explain.
Sure. So Richard, my response was more of a formality from my boss's boss, which was included on the email with Tim. I'm glad you included Tim in the email. I think he should be looped in as an engineer for the district. But my boss's boss is the executive director of the Office of Transportation Planning, and he has no association or affiliation with this project. So upon receiving that email, there was really just confusion across the board, which he shared with my boss, which trickled down to me. So based on the language in the email, it sounded like we were sort of trying to stuff a speed management study and a consultant supported study into basically the next 10 business days by the end of the application on the 20th. So my response was to address his concerns and just sort of get into writing that these aren't requirements of the application, rather they're unique to what the group wants to do in their application.
Yeah, okay. Who's your boss's boss, by the way?
That's David Mueller. So I'm not quite sure how you got his email, Richard, but I would strongly advise not reaching out to him again. I'm happy to send it up the chain next time, but just
I will not email, but you had said on a few occasions that, the MPO may have some money, maybe you might want to talk with them.
Yes, that's the MPO. Those are the members of MAPC. I see you CC'd Eric Barasa and possibly one other, Tegan Teague, who's also the executive director of CTPS, but David Mueller is not associated with the MPO.
Well, he runs the meetings, and so I had put as copies to the executive director of CTPS and him as chair of the MPO.
Okay, no problem. He runs the meetings because Secretary Tessler, the CEO of MassDOT.
Right, I understand. Being on the MPO, I understand how that works. I was just trying to be collaborative with MassDOT. I assumed that MassDOT would just say, we're not involved in it. You put it into your thing, and if you get the grant, we'll work with you like we will work with any other communities who want to go through the MassDOT speed management process.
Yes, but it's my understanding that information has already been communicated to the group, not only by myself, but by Tim Paris and others. I feel like the speed management question, comes up basically at every single meeting, and the same information is always shared. So I think
that information is that MassDOT won't support it.
No, they will support it.
But when? After
the two-way project comes in.
Yeah, if it's in the grant proposal, and if it's approved, then we can go ahead. If it's not, then we don't do it.
Is that okay?
I
got a
believe so.
different.
I'm still just a little bit confused.
Yeah.
Simona's raising her hand.
Yeah, Simone.
So I guess, and not that I'm weighing in specifically about the speed study in terms of it's a good idea or it's not a good idea. But it's more of, for this grant application, would us including that within it strengthen our application or weaken our application in terms of it being successfully selected for award? So we have a lot that I think we're putting forward as part of this grant application that I think would be very attractive in regards to the signage, corridor improvements in terms of view shed areas and such. So my concern is that if we try to include the speed study, that might not necessarily position the grant application in a way that it could be successful.
Yeah.
So I put that out there. I might be the only one who is concerned about that. I know that the speed study has generated a lot of interest kind of across the board with the committee, but I don't know if including it in the grant application is the best approach.
Okay, and
That's kind
I
of,
think that's a fair question, and I guess my take on it is that when I look at the NOFO and look at what the priorities are, I mean, there are serious safety issues with the Battle Road as it is right now. And I think in my briefer write-up, I tried to point out what the issues were and what is it that we can do to make the visitor experience in 2025 safer. And I think this is the only part of the application that talks about that. And again, if the application has two thrusts to it, one more or less of aesthetic improvements and stewardship along with this, the reviewers can say, we like this part, but we don't like this part. We'll fund this and not the other part. I think that's part of what the application talks about.
Yeah, but that could be wishful thinking too, and the whole thing could go down the tube. So let's be careful about being overly influenced by wishful thinking.
yeah,
I agree. We shouldn't do wishful thinking. We should be very realistic about what the application is looking for and what we're proposing.
okay, we know, got that. Chris, I was trying to get from you maybe clarification about how that would be viewed by Mass DOT. And I know you might not be able to say how it would be reviewed for the nationwide review team.
Yeah, so Mass, I mean, we don't even review the applications. We just send them to FHWA. I'm reviewing them more as like a courtesy to try and provide support. But
Okay.
the only information I have is the information that was in the resources that I've been sharing in the past couple of months. Aside from that, I'm sort of on the same page as all of you. This is my first time submitting a grant, reviewing grant materials. And yeah.
Well, I think realistically speaking, a speed study would not result in any changes by 2024, 2025. Isn't that fair to say that it would be a longer process and perhaps a very expensive process, but we don't know the answer to the expense part. But it's hard to imagine that speeds could be reduced or altered by 2025.
Well, I think more important than the speeds is what is going to be the visitor experience. And I think that's part of what the process is to figure out. I mean, one of the things is that there are 200 sites or events along the 19 miles, and visitors are going to be trying to identify where is that historic house, where is that museum. And if they are in a flow of 40-mile-an-hour traffic or 30-mile-an-hour traffic, what is their attention span and what is it that we want to set up for visitors?
Yeah, I can see that part of it. I just wonder. Yeah, it's more of a future oriented.
Yeah, whether or not any speeds are changed, I think that's sort of the secondary part. I think the important part is trying to evaluate what the visitor experience is going to look like, especially for motorists. And, if the result is that there are no changes in speed, I think we would have learned quite a bit from it.
So is this something that you expect to hear from Tool that will also include impact on visitor experience or evaluation of impact on visitor experience? Is that what they're?
Yeah, so Taylor had indicated she would be able to provide, since they're doing this exact study with some other towns, she indicated she could have some cost breakdowns in terms of, time frame and cost estimates.
Can I ask a question? Because I too am among the confused. So Chris, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So basically, did your folks at MassDOT say they would support a speed study someday? Is that what I heard you say? And I know there's nuance to it, so just if you have to repeat it, I'm just trying to isolate on this one issue with regard to MassDOT.
Yeah, so I'm almost taking this back to the conversations that have been going on for months now related to the Route 2A project.
I haven't been around for a couple months, so I think that's why I'm confused.
Okay, so I'll try to summarize. The speed limits are too high on the road. I think that's clear and everyone's in agreement upon that, but we can't, avoid moving through the proper channels to lower those speed limits. A speed study needs to be conducted, and at the current, makeup of the road, that speed study would indicate that cars are going faster than the posted speed limit. And if that's the case, the speed limit cannot be lowered. If anything, they might raise it. So I think MassDOT's intent was to construct the Route 2A project, hoping that, the new design would slow cars down to the speed limit, and then after that, perform a speed study and then consider changing the speed limit.
So
okay, so hang on, Richard, please,
Yeah,
because I think we know you want to include it in the grant application, but what I'm trying to figure out is if the grant application is the sensible way to approach this, because what I'm hearing is that MassDOT is okay with doing a speed study. So generally speaking, but just not right now, but I don't think we need to apply in this grant for a speed study if they will do it someday. So it's not like it won't happen without the grant, but these other things that we're asking for in the grant won't happen without the grant. So I think it's, as I'm thinking about the story we're going to tell in the grant application, the signage, the resource protection is all hanging together, and the speed study does seem like a little bit of a narrative outlier. And because we know that someday MassDOT will do this and we don't need to apply for funding for it, it might not make sense to put it in with the rest of the grant application. That's how I'm interpreting this information.
Okay. And my answer to that is that the Route 2A piece of the byway is 2.4 miles. The whole byway is 19 miles. If we want in the application to exclude, that section of 2A, to me, the more important part, because like you say, the 2A is going to take care of itself sooner or later, but it's the other parts. In Lexington, there are 11 speed changes over, a short period of, and that's not good for the visitor experience. And that's not through the park. And MassDOT would never do anything on its own because it's not part of the state highway. Same thing with the roads in Concord beyond the park boundaries, that MassDOT would never look at speeds along Lexington Road because it's not within this corridor. And so to me, if we want in the application to exclude that section of 2A from the speed management, we can do that. If we think that is going to cause problems. To me, what's more important is the rest of the byway.
I understand what you're saying.
The 2A section is going to take care of itself one way or another.
I'd
Okay,
just like to
Go.
point out too, very briefly, Chris can correct me if I'm wrong. MassDOT's idea of a speed study is based on the 85th percentile
No,
standard, I think, and it usually doesn't go beyond that. So I think practice is moving away from the 85th percentile as setting speeds. One of the reasons is that often results in higher speed limits.
so Richard, why don't you get the quotes? And I think I understand what you're saying now. And we can say, you know, non-state owned local roads that are on the byway. We can frame it that way. And that's the story. Let's
we can
just
do that.
gather the information, put it in. I've had trouble teasing out how this, so let's just sort of, if it's not the state roads, we can just sort of set that piece aside and talk about them in terms of local roads where speeds are of concern.
Bob?
Yeah, my concern is that my impression reading the grant application information was that this is a program for tangible improvements to byways, and that it's not necessarily including the idea of studies that may result in tangible improvements. Now, this is back to Simone's question, is the application stronger or weaker by including this? So I'm open to hearing people's opinions, but I think the central question is whether this grant application, grant process is really just intended for tangible improvements, or whether it can be studies which might result in nothing tangible.
I don't think
yeah.
I don't think that's quite correct. Implementation of a corridor management plan is like an umbrella for studies, and that's explicitly eligible. I take your point,
Yeah.
but I don't think studies to improve the byway are excluded.
Yeah, I agree that the implementing a corridor management plan can be extremely broad in terms of its scope. But in terms of this particular grant program, I don't know, to me, tangible projects are something that the federal government would be more responsive to. But
I never saw,
again, yeah.
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
never saw prohibition like or anything like that in the grant directions, but I take your point that something tangible and immediately impactful might be more attractive to the reviewing committee. I started to try to find out a little bit more about how this application might be viewed at the national level, and I haven't gotten completely satisfied about that. So
Yeah.
it's a little
Okay.
bit
Well,
more.
certainly
So
Richard's idea.
it would be interesting to see, as Ally said, to see maybe what tool comes up with, if they can do something fast enough that we could use. But I'm also concerned that, you know, if Route 2A doesn't get a study that helps lower the speed limit on 2A, that's not helpful either.
Let's just leave it for now. Let's get a draft together and we can,
I would agree with that.
yeah, and let's just see how it reads when we put it all together with the rest of the information.
And Chris, is it correct that Mass Highway is still mostly, if not exclusively, doing speed studies that are based on the 85th percentile standard?
You know, I'm not sure I can provide, you know, the strongest answer to that. I know that based on the, you know, information reviewed by the safety office and the safety director, that we're moving away from that because it doesn't always result in safer speed limits.
Yeah.
I'm happy to get more information on that though.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That would be really important, I think.
So Chris, so Tool says they're working with four projects on this. Are you aware of any others that are going through the MassDOT speed management process?
For speed management studies, Tool is supporting.
they said they're supporting 4 towns, four separate projects about this. Are you aware of any other consultants who are working with other entities on trying to apply the speed management process?
Specifically for speed management, no, I'm not.
Okay. Are you aware of what Tool is doing with these communities?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so unless somebody has a different idea, we'll wait and see what Tool presents. And hopefully we can compare it. In the meantime, we can put something about the speed study in the draft application.
And I can write it 2
And-
ways, one with speed study applying to the whole byway and the other applying to local.
Well, but that could just be a, insert
Yeah,
or
one
or a
sentence.
deletion. Yeah,
Right.
not a whole different thing.
Yeah, don't bother with 2 versions. That's okay.
No. Okay. Other questions, as long as Chris is here. We had a question about accounting for volunteer hours. I think that's something I did ask Chris.
Nancy, let me
I'm
just
sorry,
ask.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Nancy, just continuing on the speed issue. For the other towns, putting aside 2A and Lincoln, don't we need to account for the fact that within the towns of, let's say, Arlington and Lexington, 99% of the folks who go down that roadway are not visitors to the byway. They're just trying to get somewhere.
No.
And
Yeah, but as the byway committee, we're concerned about visitors, and for this grant, we're concerned about visitor experience by 2025.
Understood. So maybe in your narrative, you should try and introduce that as one of the issues that you need to deal with, not
Mhm.
just appropriate speeds for the byway, but the fact that this is a multi-use
I did talk
place
about,
where you have to accommodate folks who just need to get somewhere.
right, and that's why I did cite the figure of 17,000 trips per day. Not all, obviously, most of them are not byway traffic.
Yeah, I don't know that was obvious in the narrative. All I'm saying is maybe tailor the narrative to include this diversity of users.
Yeah,
that have to be.
that goes back to the idea of a collector versus an arterial. And for years, the communities have been interested in a change classification to reflect more of the side use that's developed over the last 20 or 30 years. Okay, okay, can we return to the volunteer accounting, Chris? Do you guys require any particular reporting formats? I saw something in the NOFA that required one federal agency to use a certain form. Does DOT have anything in particular?
Nancy, I saw your email yesterday. I didn't get a chance to respond. I can follow up with people in MassDOT, but my big concern here is that it takes time to retrieve information from other parties and other sources in the Department of Transportation. And we're sort of, at the 2-minute warning here. There's 5 business days left, 6 business days. So, I mean, it's going to take time to retrieve this information, and none of it is really available to me on hand.
Okay.
So after this meeting, I'm going to, shoot out a bunch of emails, but I'm hoping it comes fast, but I just want to share that concern that time is of the essence, and I can't guarantee that I can answer all these questions. Okay,
well, there's a question about VIP accounting, and then there's another question about the match and whether or not Mass Highway, I think this one's a really important one, will accept non-cash matches like services in kind or whatnot.
I believe that's spelled out in one of the PDFs I share, but I can take a look back.
I think we can take a look at that as well. But also how how the match, you know, it was said at meetings in the past that the Park Service could make the match. And I think Simone affirmed that that was possible, but I'm not sure. That was one thing. That they're doing so much work that benefits the byway so immediately close to the byway that might be counted as part of the non-federal match, even though the park is a federal entity. Simone, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so I guess, so that would be my question. So as it relates to the investments that will be coming through for the Great American Outdoors Act, so those investments have not started yet, but will be happening over the next couple of years. I don't have the specific dollar amount yet, as we're still doing cost estimates for the work associated with the landscaping and the trail work, with part of that falling within the byway corridor. So I won't have that information by Friday. So
Okay.
I don't know how the match would be described, and since we are a federal agency, if it even counts as a match.
There are exceptions for federal agencies, and that's what I was trying to find out, but it's hard to find out exactly. So thank you.
I can poke through that document as well again to get a response.
Okay.
Because I initially want to say no, that another federal organization can't provide the match. But Nancy, if you said there are exceptions, then maybe there's a chance there is.
Yeah.
However, MassDOT will provide the local match in the form of state bond cap.
MassDOT will provide a local match,
Yes.
so you guys can contribute to the non-federal match.
Yes.
At what level, do you know?
Well, it can't exceed 20%. I mean, I don't even know how much money you are all considering in the application. The number that was tossed around was like 500,000 at one point, but I haven't seen or heard anything since then.
Yeah, okay. And would it be okay to include that, at least that Mass DOT would provide part of the non-federal match?
Yes.
And if we get a number, we can put in an estimated dollar amount for that match?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Just a second, I'm taking notes. Okay. This is interesting. I wish we weren't trying to build the airplane while we're flying, but we are, and I think there's enough specificity coming together that we'll give that a shot. I'll send you, Chris, the citation. I think I can find it in the NOFA announcement about the exception, the agency that had an exception. It might have been BLM or something. So, okay. Anybody else have?
I have a question for Chris. So in terms of our signage program, in terms of what we put in for the application, we had obviously a consultant design a whole suite of signs, and Connie Raphael had said you should talk to Sarah Timmener about approval. And when we talked to her and when we talked to your predecessor, the idea was, well, MassDOT is coming up with a standard for signs that might apply to scenic byways. And I don't know if MassDOT has ever adopted anything about byway signage regulations. Are you aware of any, Chris?
MassDOT has a lot of regulations for all of its signs. I'm not sure about anything that relates specifically to the scenic byways.
And because we have plenty of time to figure out approvals and policies and stuff later. We have to get this grant done in less than a week.
Yep.
So I kind of just want to stick to like the draft deadlines, and like, because we're gonna talk again on the 15th next week.
Yeah.
And then we want to give everything to Chris by the end of the day on the 15th. So for like the narrative pieces and the updating the, volunteer hours for the in-kind stuff and all the budget pieces, does everyone think we can get stuff by like Monday, which will not leave a lot of time for editing and revising, like maybe like noon on Monday, so people have the weekend to do stuff, or just the rest of this week and Monday morning, and then Monday afternoon and Tuesday can be spent sort of polishing things up.
So we have to have it to Chris by the 17th.
Yeah, but we wanted to give it to
Monday
him a
sounds like a
couple.
good,
No, I'm just talking backwards to myself.
You're talking to yourself, but the rest of us are,
Well, we want to get
Listening.
it to him by the 15th,
Sorry.
so that so that he has a minute to communicate with us if there's any changes. But I think we want like a pretty darn good draft by the time we meet at 10 a.m. on the 15th. So if Monday by
yeah, I agree
noon
with
can
that.
be like the deadline for all the materials, and then they can get a piece together.
I think
by
that's an
Wednesday morning.
ambitious goal, but I think it's a good one.
I think we have to be ambitious at this point.
I think we're being ambitious.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, the
Okay.
13th.
all right, a couple of
That's a
questions
target.
in terms of that. Do we have, or do we need a UEI number? And, just in terms of, getting the boilerplate together.
That's the state, I think. I'm sorry.
But
Go
it talks about partners. I mean,
ahead, Chris. I'm
I
sorry.
know Chris needs to have one, but do we
Yeah.
need to have one?
I don't believe so. I think just the Department of Transportation, and we have one.
And the other part is the applications don't talk about letters of support. I mean, do we need letters from Trahan, Clark, and Markey and Warren, or the selectmen?
Need, no. If you can acquire letter of support in the next like 5 days, I it definitely wouldn't harm the application, but I would say prioritize the actual narrative.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, since we
One
don't
of-
know what it's going to look like for a while.
One of the things for Ally in terms of matches, so we, in our meetings over the years have talked about towns coming up with money for the byway, and it was sort of said, well, when we have something specific, then we can ask the towns. And so part of the question is whether any of the towns have money that they have committed to apply toward the match. I know when I talked to Lexington, we don't have a specific line item for that. Maybe we should. And since I think we could talk about fiscal 2023 or 24 for when the communities have to come up with it. And maybe Arlington has some money to put in for a match. I don't know if any other towns do or how that.
I already put it. We get a $2,000 a year budget. I already put it in the thing.
Okay, and I don't know.
And I think we had committed $1,000 for the sign project. So I will double check that figure, but Ally, I believe it is 1,000.
Yeah, so on the spreadsheet, you can just plunk that in with like your hours information. There's
Will
a
do.
spot for it in one of the tabs.
Okay, great.
And Elizabeth can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Concord has a line item.
So
sure.
I put a line item in the planning division budget every year. And so I'm trying to confirm right now with Marcia whether it survived the town manager FinCom town meeting approval process. If it did, my original request is for $5,000.
Yeah, and you've done that in the past because I've invoiced you for it, and that's how we, so we can assume we have it, I think, and you can tell us if not.
Yeah, that's excellent. I didn't know that. Okay. Anything else? Anybody? Ally, thank you.
Sure. Who's going to do the letters of support outreach?
I'm too busy. I think
Yeah,
I agree with Chris's advice that it'd be nice, but good luck, because I don't know how we would describe the project.
I can draft one and probably get our town manager to sign it. But for the state officials, I'm not sure. I can ask him if he can help with that, but I'll take that on as like our town's thing. I just want to make sure we're clear about who's doing what.
Well, probably for letters of support, the individual members could do that work. And good luck to us. But possible. Okay. Anything else? Anybody? We have a roll call vote, or an emotion, rather. We should probably have a motion first to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, Arlington,
Yes.
Lexington,
Yes.
Lincoln,
yes.
Concord, yes. National Park,
Yes.
thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good luck.